My comic analysis is on Daredevil Born Again. Daredevil Born Again was written by Frank Miller and drawn by David Mazzucchelli, I believe is how you pronounce it, but I'm not sure. The publisher is Marvel Comics. The length is 177 pages. It is a graphic novel because it has a complete story. It tells a complete story with a complete arc and complete character arcs. So it is a graphic novel. The end of Act 1 comes on page 30, and the end of Act 2 comes on page 146. So it fits the model in that Act 2 takes up a really large chunk of the story, and the setup is pretty short, and the end is even shorter. So I think it fits the model well. The story is about Matt Murdock, or Daredevil, that's his superhero name. So basically, his former girlfriend Karen Page tells a man that Matt Murdock is Daredevil. The man works for Kingpin and tells Kingpin this. So the Kingpin takes this information and he makes Matt Murdock's life really miserable. He frames him for crimes he didn't do. He gets him banned from practicing law, which is his job. So he has no job. He can't pay his bills because he has no money. And eventually his house gets blown up. And that's when he figures out that the Kingpin is the one responsible for all this. Matt's goal is to stop the Kingpin and everyone who's working for the Kingpin so he can have his life back and get his life back to normal. The conflict in Act 2 is all about Matt fighting off the Kingpin and his henchmen and everyone involved in the Kingpin's plans to ruin Matt's life. So the conflict does definitely support the goal of Matt trying to stop the Kingpin and everyone who is working with the Kingpin. The story arc, there is a story arc. The beginning has a clear beginning when Kingpin finds out that Matt is Daredevil. That's the beginning of the story, and that sets up everything that is to come later on. The middle portion is basically all the conflict with Matt fighting the Kingpin, where he gets beat up by the Kingpin. He almost dies at the hand of the Kingpin. He fights several of the people involved with the Kingpin, several corrupt people, including a nurse, a corrupt cop, and a bunch of other people. There is an end as well. The Kingpin is revealed to be behind the big massacre that happens in the third act of the story. And I think the ending is satisfying, even though he doesn't necessarily stop the Kingpin. He doesn't beat up the Kingpin, like a typical superhero thing, and he gets, the Kingpin doesn't get arrested or anything, but the Kingpin ends up being exposed as a criminal, the criminal that he is, instead of being respected by everyone, because earlier in the book he actually got an award. They don't say what the award is really for, but he gets an award from a bunch of other rich people like him, and it ruins his reputation at the end when people find out that he's behind all these horrible acts and that he's actually a criminal. So I think in that way the ending is satisfying. If you want to see like a big action, to end the story, you're probably going to be disappointed because there's not a big fight between Kingpin and Daredevil. As far as the character arc, Matt definitely has a character arc because in the beginning he's miserable, broke, he can't pay his bills, his house is blown up. He's basically like the most miserable man on the planet. There's even one scene where he's walking down the street after all these bad things have been happening to him. He just gets run over by this dude in a car and he's just lying on the street. He's like, I just got to keep moving on. So I think Frank Miller does a good job in making us care about Daredevil and Matt Murdock. And at the end, he stopped the Kingpin, and he's slowly getting back to a good place. And you can see he kind of looks happier. He smiles at the end. So there's definitely an arc there where I think he starts to appreciate more his life, and that he needs to keep going no matter how hard life gets. because in the beginning there's a lot of points where he's like, I just want to go to sleep. I'm tired. I want to sleep. He's about to leave to go fight the Kingpin. No, I'd rather stay and sleep. And by the end, he's taking all the action and he's trying to get his life back. So I think that's a good arc for Matt Murdock. Karen Page has an arc as well, actually. She starts off the story as a junkie who's apparently been in some adult films. But she starts off as a junkie, and the reason she gives away the fact that Matt is Daredevil is to get a fix, because she's a druggie. And by the end, throughout she realizes this is bad. What am I doing to myself? She calls herself like a stupid junkie multiple times throughout. And by the end, it looks as though she's clean and she's not doing drugs anymore. And she's also smiling with Matt in the last picture. So it appears they both changed quite a bit by the end of the story from where they were at the beginning. The transitions are fairly basic. They do a good job. I don't know here. They do a good job of getting you to the next place. So they do their job basically. They're nothing elaborate or super crazy or anything, but there are a couple points. Let me see if I can find one actually. There's a couple points where it will just change in the middle of a page to a different scene, and there are times when it got kind of confusing for me. Let me see if I can find where that is. But while I'm looking for it, overall the transitions are fine though. They're like normal comic transitions, so nothing super crazy, nothing elaborate, but they do their job. Let me. Of course, now I can't find it. Where is it? Here we go. There's a point right here where we're with Matt and he's going to go talk to the Kingpin. The very next frame is the outside of a building, and it turns out to be two different completely people talking. And it kind of confused me. I had to read it back and go, wait, is that the same people or is that different people? But other than that, the transitions seem fine enough. As far as the page as a mini comic idea, the pages have a decent flow, and it makes sense. The panels do progress logically, so you can see, okay, this panel, and then the next thing's happening in the next panel, and it makes it, it follows a pattern. But I don't think it tells like a complete story in one page necessarily. A lot of it will leave off into the next page, so something will happen. Oh, okay, read the next page, and it will continue. So as far as pages of mini comic, it kind of works, I guess, but it doesn't make a complete story. As far as directional flow, I didn't really notice any directional flow within the comic. It doesn't look like they're leading you towards the next panel that's supposed to be there. I guess they weren't really focused on getting you to the next panel like that. But the way the story is written and the art is decent enough for me where I knew like I wanted to continue on rather than relying on the pattern to take me to the next panel. So I don't think they use directional flow, but I don't think they necessarily needed to. Would I recommend Daredevil Born Again? I would recommend it because I think it's unique in that it's a different kind of superhero story. Instead of having, the superhero end up fighting the bad guy, they clash, and then the villain goes to jail and all this kind of stuff. It's kind of different. You don't really see Daredevil in his costume a lot of times. A lot of the focus is on Matt as just a normal person and all the bad things he's going through, not being able to pay his bills, his electricity gets turned off, he can't cook anything. He has to stay at a cheap hotel. He has like $8 apparently. I think they did a good job focusing on the human aspect rather than the superhuman, superhero aspect. And it seems different from anything else I've read as far as superheroes go in that regard. I did find a fact in there. Apparently, since Daredevil is a Catholic, he's like the only Catholic superhero that I know of. But apparently, there's a lot of art in here comparing Matt Murdock to Jesus. And the first chapters of the book have Matt, all of them have Matt lying down in the splash pages. Like this one for chapter 1, he's lying down in the bed. And for chapter 2 and 3, they have Matt in a fetal position, almost, like he's, going through a rough time, he's helpless. Let me get to chapter 3. But apparently these are supposed to be parallels to Jesus. There he is again, laying in the fetal position, even worse off because he's in an alley instead of a bed. And then by chapter 4, which is titled Born Again, he's laying in an almost crucified pose like Jesus, when Jesus was crucified, almost in that sense. And chapter 5 is the first chapter where he's not laying down and he's actually standing. And they say that it's supposed to be like a resurrected Jesus, something similar as Christ has risen. So, Matt Murdock has risen and he's ready to fight to get his life back. So yeah, that's my analysis of Daredevil Born Again.